right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, something I've been turning over in my mind since Trump's last debate with Joe Biden is that the president who destroyed the modern Republican Party and who exposed them as corrupt, hapless fools that they really are, increasingly is becoming exactly the type of person whom he beat in 2016. You could see this a lot throughout the debate, with Trump attacking Joe Biden for being a so-called tool of the radical left and harping consistently about raised taxes or the stock market instead of talking about trade deals and immigration. But the area that you really see Trump has become mostly a conventional Republican, in many respects, is his handling of coronavirus. From the very beginning, Trump had two options. He could become the national populist president who led the country through a crisis by bucking his party's historic commitment to fiscal austerity with huge rescue packages for American workers, trade retribution against China for covering up this plague, and by throwing the might of the federal government against defeating it in a World War II-style effort. The other option was to do what the Republican Party wanted him to do, which is not take the virus all that seriously and find a fake boogeyman to blame for the state of the U.S. economy and the country. And unfortunately, that's what he's decided to do. Around March or April, Trump and the Republican Party basically decided to stop pretending to care about the virus and pivoting to the notion that actually coronavirus isn't all that bad, with the message that we should just open back up and that alone would save the U.S. economy. Well, how did that work out? Well, more people got sick across the entire American South, but more importantly, the economic libertarians in the Republican Party scored their real goal. No matter how bad things got out there for the average American, they could point to any coronavirus restrictions in place as the real issue. Therefore, they had an alternative to spending money in Congress. And as long as they had that fake pseudo-reality, then they had something to cling to. That pseudo-reality, more than anything, is responsible right now for lack of economic stimulus for the American people. And that's essentially what Trump has bought into. I don't think he shares the economic ideology. More, it's just a lot easier for him to try and wish away the virus and save the economy than actually doing the work of whipping votes in Congress. And lo and behold, that's basically exactly what he tweeted yesterday from his hospital room when he announced he was being discharged from Walter Reed back to the White House, when he said, quote, "I will be leaving the great Walter Reed Medical Center today at 6:30 p.m. Feeling really good. Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life. We have developed, under the Trump administration, some really great drugs and knowledge. I feel better than I did 20 years ago." So there you have it. The overt message from a person who was literally hospitalized and shot up full of experimental drugs and steroids is that the disease isn't that bad. And look, I accept some validity to the argument that it's not nearly as bad as some people in the media want us to believe. But the problem that Republicans and Trump have is basically nobody trusts a word that they have to say about the virus because they didn't take it seriously in the first place. As we have covered here ad nauseum, the vast majority of Americans want to keep social distancing even if it means economic impact. And they think the worst of the virus is yet to come. When a president who was just hospitalized says, "Don't worry about it," they see more kabuki theater, not reassurance that everything is okay. They see only another reason that they shouldn't get on a plane or go out to eat or, in effect, conduct commerce, which is ultimately our goal to save the many millions destroyed by this economic depression. As evidence, Trump is weirdly becoming a conventional Republican. The longer this campaign drags on, I present to you a statement from one of the great villains of Rising, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, one of the most libertarian senators in the entire body, a major opponent of spending, and currently a Republican senator positive for coronavirus. What is that senator doing in his convalescence? Is he making sure other Americans are okay? Is he drawing attention to its seriousness? Drawing attention to the fact that so many millions are hurting because of the economic conditions we have? Oh no, of course not. He's actually arguing more Americans should be infected with the beloved Sweden theory put forward by libertarians since day one of this crisis. He told a Denver radio station, quote, "We should have followed the Sweden model, isolate the sick, quarantine them, protect the vulnerable, and allow the rest of society to carry on with life as carefully as possible." Adding, I mean, there's a level of unjustifiable level of hysteria around COVID. Sound familiar? Almost could have come out of Trump's mouth. And in case you were wondering, as a matter of economic theory, Sweden's economy still fell 8% in GDP in August, similar to our own. They lost more people than their neighbors, and they had identical contraction projections as Denmark did back in June in terms of how they would be hurt by the virus. In effect, they lost more people, and they have very similar results to the rest of Europe in terms of their economy crashing. So that brings us to where we are today. Less than 1 month to go before the presidential election, and Republican president and senators' message for the American people is that actually the plague that has killed 200,000 Americans ain't all that bad. And if we stop being afraid of it, then things will get better, instead of whipping votes and doing everything humanly possible to move an economic stimulus bill through the United States Senate. Maybe this sounds very harsh for the many of you who are on the right and are viewing this, but if you consider yourself a populist, then at the very least, you need to consider what the majority of Americans want. And the answer is actually pretty clear. The majority of Americans want economic stimulus. They want to feel that their leaders take coronavirus seriously and are actively working to mitigate its effects. And the thing they distrust, above all, is spin that everything is okay, especially after 7 months of nonstop similar messaging from the White House and Republican Party on this front. The reason we're staring down the barrel at an increasingly likely historic defeat in November is precisely because the will of the people was ignored. In crisis, they demand firm leadership, serious and bold action, not simply trying to wish something away. Remember, after FDR said that the only thing we had to fear was fear itself, he proposed and passed the most transformative economic legislation that this country had ever seen and has seen since. And if you don't follow through, then it doesn't mean anything. And that's something I couldn't help. I had to write this for the many people on the right who are like enthralled with Trump and are like, oh, this is amazing. He's owning the libs. They're like, Trump beat Corona's ass in 3 days. I mean, you can beat a lot of things when you have a world-class medical team at your side. And
gotta love that socialized medicine.
Who knows if he even beat it? You just got to think about this. Like I said, they're like, yeah, but FDR didn't say go out there and, have fear and please, my friends, go put your money in the banks. He followed that up by passing the FDIC, so it never would happen again.
Right.
He followed that up with the 100 days and the legislation. If you want to cast yourself in the mold of FDR, be my guest, but then go out and actually do what he did. He didn't just talk. He did a lot of things. Talking was one part of it, but a lot of it was action. They're not interested in any action.
The thing that's so interesting, too, is that, Trump makes this argument of like, well, actually, I'm the one that took it seriously. And he points to some comments that Joe Biden made early on, opposition to the ban of travelers from China, things that Nancy Pelosi did, going out to Chinatown and saying, come out and eat and shop and all those things.
Which is true.
And he's actually not wrong about that, which points out the fact at the very beginning of this crisis, it was actually the right wing that took this more seriously. Tucker Carlson was the one on Fox News who was like raising the alarms early on, like this is happening, this is coming, we need to be serious about it. So now, as we're standing here today watching the president like flout the mask thing and all of the insanity that we've witnessed over the past week, it seems like it's inevitable that it would be the right that would be opposed to the lockdowns, the restrictions, that would be flaunting this and saying, oh, it's not that big a deal. But that path and trajectory was actually not predetermined. It was not set. And at the beginning, it actually looked like things would go in the opposite direction. And it could have. You lay it out here very clearly. It could have been that Trump exercised some of his sort of authoritarian instincts to take this seriously and take control and have the big leader energy the way that Cuomo did up in New York. And that was really what people wanted to see from a leader in this moment. They were down for some like authoritarian energy of here's what we're going to do. And I'm going to call up the companies. I'm going to make them produce these critical supplies. And we're all in this together. Like people were set and ready for that. And it was a playbook that I thought maybe Trump would ultimately run. He's gone in the polar opposite direction. And we've tracked this from the beginning. This is one of the areas where being inside the right-wing bubble and the Fox News bubble and all of this has so disserved the entire country. But in terms of his political prospects, it's been a disaster because these were all issues that like the Republican base was all in on and everyone else in the country was in the other direction.
Well, and here's the thing. Most of the Republican base will pretty much go with whatever Trump directs. This is, again, a story about power. And this is, again, a common theme of the show, which is that what you want and what the populace wants doesn't matter. It's about elite opinion and how that shapes our lawmakers here in D.C. What happened is that a handful of extraordinarily powerful Republicans, people like Stephen Moore and Larry Kudlow and others, concocted this theory that it's actually restrictions on businesses, which is crushing economic activity. That is not true. Even in places where they have opened economies, things are still running at 25-50% capacity. There is no business on earth, especially in the food service industry, which can survive at 50% capacity, which means somebody's got to make up that difference. That somebody should be the federal government. They decided, though, that they could continue to point to fear of the virus as the reason why that these things are not going okay. You cannot convince somebody when 200,000 people are dead and when the president of the United States is waylaid in a hospital bed that they shouldn't be afraid of something. And again, a lot of old people probably should be afraid of something.
They should. You should take it seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, don't let fear dominate your life. But we all know the basic things to do to try to protect yourself. There's some reporting coming out from inside the White House and the campaign team where basically they thought, okay, maybe this would be the last-ditch effort where the president being sick may actually humanize him. Maybe we're going to see a different tone from him. Always the tone's going to change, right? And the first videos that he was releasing from Walter Reed, he did feel a little humbled. They felt like right in the right zone. And we did see this happen with Boris Johnson where he was headed down sort of a Trumpian track. He gets sick. He starts changing the way that he approaches this and takes it more seriously. So a lot of his aides reportedly were thinking, okay, this is the last chance he's going to actually take this seriously now. He's going to be able to relate to Americans on this illness that so many people have suffered. No, out the window immediately.
No, and look, you want to know why he's down in the polls, and you want to know why the vast majority of Americans don't trust what he has to say? It's because of this attitude. Again, I blame Trump, and I blame the mainstream Republican Party who's been pushing this from the very beginning. It's all just a fake of guys in order to not pass economic stimulus. I wish they'd just admit the game.
They are so ideological that it does not matter what the fact pattern is. They will figure out a way for all roads to lead to libertarianism and government shouldn't do anything.
Brainworms, folks. All right, I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.